Every 4 years, something strange happens. People who haven't watched football in years suddenly become experts overnight. They have opinions about referees, opinions about formations, opinions about players they couldn't have named a month ago, and somehow everyone sounds completely confident. But here's the question: why? Why do millions of people suddenly care about something they mostly ignored before? And why does not caring sometimes feel more uncomfortable than caring? The answer has surprisingly little to do with football, and once you see it, you'll start noticing it everywhere. Imagine walking into work during the World Cup and having absolutely no idea what happened in last night's match. The conversation starts before you've even sat down. Did you see that goal? The referee ruined the game. The manager made a terrible decision. Everyone seems informed. Everyone has an opinion. And suddenly, knowing nothing feels strangely uncomfortable. Have you ever noticed how quickly that discomfort appears? Nobody is attacking you. Nobody is demanding that you participate. And yet, something inside your brain immediately starts working. Maybe you should have checked the score. Maybe you should have watched the highlights. Maybe you should at least know who won. It's a tiny social pressure, so small you barely notice it. But that's exactly what makes it interesting. Because if football truly meant nothing to you, why would ignorance feel uncomfortable at all? Hold on to that question, because the answer ends up explaining much more than football. Why? Because football has temporarily become social currency. But that's only the first layer of what's happening. Because fitting in was the whole story, people wouldn't get emotionally invested. Yet somehow they do. So where does that emotional investment come from? To understand that, we need to talk about something psychologists call social identity theory. Think about how strange that is for a moment. A group of athletes you've never met can improve your mood for an entire day. A loss can genuinely irritate you. A victory can make complete strangers hug each other in public. Objectively, nothing in your personal life changed. Your bills didn't disappear. Your job didn't improve. Your relationships stayed exactly the same. Yet emotionally, something shifted. Why? Because human beings don't experience reality purely as individuals. We experience it through groups. And once a group becomes part of your identity, its successes begin to feel strangely personal. And this is where things start getting strange. When someone says, "We played terribly last night," they weren't on the pitch. They didn't train. They didn't touch the ball. Yet they genuinely feel connected to the outcome. Why? Because the brain often treats group identity as an extension of personal identity. But that raises another question. If people identify so strongly with teams, why do even non-fans suddenly get pulled into the World Cup? This is where collective rituals enter the picture. For a few weeks, millions of people are paying attention to the same thing, talking about the same thing, feeling the same emotions. And shared attention is incredibly powerful. Humans have always gathered around collective experiences. Thousands of years ago, it might have been religious ceremonies, community celebrations, harvest festivals, shared stories around a fire. Today, it might be a World Cup final, different activity, same psychological function. For a brief moment, enormous numbers of people are focused on the same thing, feeling the same anticipation, the same excitement, the same disappointment. And there's something deeply satisfying about that synchronization. In a world where everyone seems increasingly fragmented, moments of shared attention feel surprisingly valuable. This is where psychology becomes slightly uncomfortable, because the answer isn't football knowledge. It's familiarity. Psychologists call this the mere exposure effect. The more often we encounter something, the more familiar it feels, and the brain has a habit of confusing familiarity with understanding. Maybe it's revealing how easily human attention can be directed, how quickly consensus forms, how naturally confidence grows from repetition, and perhaps most importantly, how often we borrow opinions from the environments around us without realizing we're doing it. That's not necessarily a flaw, it's simply part of being human. The uncomfortable part is recognizing how frequently it happens, because once you notice it during the World Cup, you start noticing it everywhere else too.
Think about politics, social media, financial markets, celebrity scandals, trending topics. How many opinions do we hold because we genuinely studied something? And how many formed simply because we encountered it hundreds of times? That's a harder question than most people like to admit, and it points towards something deeper. Maybe the World Cup isn't revealing something about football. Maybe it's revealing something about us.
Because beneath all of this sits one simple human desire: belonging. The desire to feel connected, aligned, part of something larger than ourselves. Football is simply one vehicle for that feeling. Music can do it, religion can do it, gaming communities can do it, politics can do it, even niche internet communities can do it. The object changes. The psychology remains surprisingly similar. And maybe that's the strangest thing about the World Cup. It was never really about football. Not entirely. It was about identity, belonging, shared attention, collective emotion, and the invisible psychological forces shaping how humans behave in groups. The tournament simply makes those forces easier to see, but they don't disappear when the final whistle blows. They're still influencing the conversations you have, the opinions you form, the communities you join, and sometimes the beliefs you think are entirely your own. And that's where things get really interesting, because in the next video, we're going to explore another psychological behavior that most people experience every day without realizing it. Once you start noticing these hidden social mechanisms, ordinary life becomes a lot harder to look at the same way. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.